All right, welcome back again today, ladies and gents. I thought this week we would focus on a pretty disturbing concept, which I've talked about on the channel a couple of times before, but it's now developing at a much rapid rate. And this will affect you, not just if you live in the West, whether that's the UK, USA, Europe, etc., but this will affect you in other countries as well. It's also going to hit developing nations in the very near future via supply chains. So what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about these new, and they are brand new ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance mandates that are now being passed. And of course, this week is the WEF conference. Let's go to the shared screen here. And we can see that the conference is going all of this week from the 16th to the 20th of January. So I'm sure we'll have plenty of material to cover over the next week or so from this, as we do every time, especially with the characters who are at the conference, and how fitting that Al Gore is there talking about climate-based things after his track record. But there we go. Let's get into all of the content then today. And this was the first thing that's come out from the WEF. I'm not going to focus on this too much today because we're going to focus on the new laws that have been passed. But here's what Zero Hedge has said. Swiss MP Bastien Giraud painted a vision of the near future in which governments change the nature of how population is organized. The grand idea, ? To focus people into tightly controlled cities designed around carbon controls and where cars are illegal for individuals to own, and to establish penalties for businesses that do not conform to bureaucratic climate change policies. Now that's actually what we're going to be focusing a lot on today, is the climate-based stuff, because this is what is now in force as of just a couple of weeks ago, so January 1st, 2023. And again, the word here is mandatory, so there is no option. This is now mandatory. This has come from the WEF, which is this organization here, a private organization with non-elected leaders, and they pushed out all of these regulations, many of which we've talked about before on the channel. But here it is, the EU's Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, so SFDR, which is funny because we also have SDRs, special drawing rights, no coincidence there, I'm sure, enters its level 2 phase and becomes mandatory. So I've highlighted the word oblige here because there is no option. It's not, an optional policy. It is mandatory. So let's have a look at this then. So this is EU taxonomy, January 1st, 2023. This means that from now on, organizations must publicly disclose to which degree, and it's got brackets around percentages, their turnover is taxonomy aligned, i.e. it fulfills the EU taxonomy criteria on what is considered a green or sustainable economic activity. Now, I've mentioned this a lot of times, but the issue I have is not with all of this here, because some of it I think is fairly positive. So pollution prevention. I'm in Southeast Asia at the moment. I'm in Vietnam just this week. And one thing I can share is that the pollution in a lot of Southeast Asian cities that I've been to is a lot heavier than, say, some UK or European cities. But not always. I'm just saying in general. So if you gave me, and I think probably most of you, a choice between less pollution or more pollution that you're breathing in, I think we'd all opt for less pollution. I mean, that's pretty obvious. But then there's other policies here which just do not make any sense, and the science is very divided, as we've mentioned a lot of times here. The science on a lot of the climate policies is highly controversial, highly contentious. There is a lot of division on it, and as I always say, when scientists are paid heavily to reinforce one side of the argument, then you have a biased argument. There's also a lot of problems here with the circular economy, which we'll go on to in another video. Before, it was only required to disclose the alignment for the first two. So this was climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation. But now companies would have to answer for all 6 of these things here. Now, the most extensive sustainability reporting directive ever presented by the EU enters into effect in January of 2025, but it also covers the 2024 fiscal year. So this is the most extreme measures of all of it. Because the CSRD will cover all listed companies, so this isn't, big companies, medium-sized, no, it will be all listed companies in EU-regulated markets. And not just that, we have these ISSB sustainability reporting standards as well to contend with. This is a comprehensive global, look at this word, global baseline of corporate sustainability reporting. So whether or not you agree with these measures as a company, it is irrelevant. It doesn't matter if you are Apple, the largest company in the world, or you're just a normal sized company. It makes absolutely no difference. You do not have a choice. You have to comply with these new regulations which have been put out by the WEF. And as I've mentioned a lot of times, the people who are in charge of this policy, they are biased. They're completely biased because they also own stocks and shares, and they're getting paid and they get bonuses for moving companies over to these new policies. So let me give you an example here. Let's say that you were the head of the school cafeteria, and you know that kids should be eating more healthy foods than unhealthy foods, but as part of your job, you're getting a bonus for bringing in products that you know are unhealthy. So it might be, triple cheeseburgers with bacon and, Coca-Cola and whatever else, right? So you get a bonus for the more of this that is consumed. But all the parents are saying, hold on, I don't want my kids eating a triple cheeseburger with bacon every lunchtime with fries and everything else and a Coke or whatever. I don't want my kids eating that every single day. I want them eating, a more balanced and more healthy diet. But as the parents, you have absolutely no say in it whatsoever, because the school board says it's okay, and actually not just okay, but they somehow get it written into law so that the government then says that all of you parents who don't want to do this, you are wrong, you're immoral, and you need to be silenced. That is probably the best example I can give you of some of these ESG mandates and policies that are coming down the line. So what is this SFDR then? Well, its main purpose is to reorientate capital towards more sustainable businesses and increase transparency on sustainability among financial institutions and market participants. So look at this again. They want to move more capital towards sustainable businesses, not moving more capital towards the most profitable and most efficient businesses. No, they've used the word sustainable. But the problem is we're in a capitalistic society. So what actually happens and what our entire economy is built upon is efficiency. If as a company you are efficient or your workers are, let's say, inefficient, let's use this example. The company's inefficient, the workers are inefficient, the products are too expensive, the supply chain's too expensive, you're not making a profit, the company goes bankrupt, it goes out of business. That is how it works in the system that we are living in and what we've created. But now imagine that you've got that same company, and instead of everything we just mentioned there, it's inefficient, etc. You're now as a company getting cash inflows towards you via investments, because the investments are now being skewed as well. So you're getting these capital inflows towards you, even though you're inefficient, even though you're not profitable as a company, even though your employees are not efficient in how they work, just because you meet these ESG criteria. And this is a recipe for disaster in terms of, this is just simple economics 101. You are trying to influence and override the free market economy. Now, that's not always a bad thing if you think about, say, minimum wage. if you increase the minimum wage every year, and let's say that, well, probably not a good idea to say it meets inflation at the moment, because inflation is going absolutely crazy. But yes, should minimum wage meet inflation? Absolutely. Of course it should. But then on the other flip side, you have the argument that minimum wage should not exist because people will be paid based on their efficiency. That is also part of a free market economy. Is it moral, though? That is the other question. Is that moral that someone might have, say, a family and they can't feed their family or they can't house themselves? No. And that comes into the other flip side of where we have all of these problems with the free market economy, with manipulation by central banks, with making property prices so high that people can't afford to buy their own home, can't afford the rent, can't afford even food and energy right now. These are the negative downside of the free market economy when you have manipulation from governments and central banks. So who is going to be affected by these SFDRs then? Well, guess who they're targeting straight away, because they know that the money talks, money walks. Investment funds, pension funds, asset managers, insurance companies, also banks. I've highlighted in yellow here, banks, venture capital, credit institutions, financial advisors. So now you've got to be even more cautious, because you don't know if your financial advisor is intentionally pushing you towards ESG-based companies rather than the most profitable companies that's going to give you a good return. And this could also happen with your bank, your broker, whoever's managing your money for you if you're not managing it yourself. Again, I can't stress this enough. I do have a finance course in the description, and it will teach you exactly what you need to do so that you can avoid all of this stuff that we're talking about here, all the ESG things, and you can invest based on sound, good returns and companies that are strong in terms of their balance sheet, not their ESG score. Because this is a reality now. I do mentoring all the time, as you know, one-on-one sessions with people. I work as a consultant to some of these finance firms, and they are so focused now on ESG and getting this good ESG score because they're terrified of losing their banking facilities and losing investments from pension funds and hedge funds and all these other things. So the market, and this is why I've said over and over again, the market we're moving into as we go forward is going to be completely different to anything we've seen in the past because of ESG. And actually just this week, a small firm, financial firm, bought the course for all of their staff because the guy basically said, it's just too much hassle for me to try and learn all of this stuff and then have someone teach it to all the staff. So anyway, that link is below in the description if you're interested in the course. Although SFDR is an EU regulation, funds outside of Europe that are marketed in Europe also fall under the disclosure requirements, since the regulation will have an extensive impact on sustainability worldwide. Many consider it to be a point of no return for the financial market. It is only getting greener from here, which is ironic because that's exactly what carbon does to the world. It makes the world greener. If you've seen any of these satellite images recently, quite fascinating how green the world is now with the added carbon. Now, we also have this about the quick summary of the goals of all of these policies. And I know there's all these abbreviations. Don't even worry about the abbreviations. But one of the goals is to help companies, SMEs, become more attractive to investors and other stakeholders through better disclosure requirements. And this is what's wrong right now with investing. If you think about what an investment is, it's really about how you can get the best return on your capital. Although they're trying to even rewrite this word now of what an investment is. They're trying to say, oh, it's an investment into green energy and it's an investment into cleaner air and better water. And all of these things to me sound great, that we have cleaner water and better air and better health and all these things. But actually it's not true. If you actually follow the money on all of these things, it's just complete nonsense. And I'll give you an example of one at the end of the video, but it's nonsense. They aren't really focused on these things. They're focused on pretending to do these things, or, like carbon offsetting. Some of the biggest polluters in the world, they do this carbon offsetting, but it's not carbon offsetting at all. Donating $1 million to a advisory charity company that talks about and does studies on climate change, you're not offsetting any carbon. I mean, this stuff is just absurd. It's bizarre. And the other way they're going to be doing this is through the supply chain, what they're calling the value chains. Upstream in your value chain, environmental impact can come from your suppliers, e.g. the impact of producing the products, ingredients, materials they deliver. So again, there'll be an influence here in that if your suppliers are not green enough, you will eventually have to move from them and move to a more green supplier. So this is going to hit everyone eventually, no matter what, all around the world. Downstream in your value chain, the impact could come from consumers, e.g. the electricity required for using your products. I mean, this is how diverse and spread out this is now. And if you want to know more specifically what they are focusing on in terms of ESG, you've got analysts and brokers. They've got to incorporate ESG into their work. Investors, asset managers, pension trustees, governments, regulators, stock exchanges. So this will affect S&P and the Dow and the FTSE. Government, NGOs, so you've got all your charities, consultants, accountants, educators. This is the one that's a little worrying because we know the influence that they're putting through all the educators at the moment. And then, of course, the companies, which will pretty much push it through right through the supply chain. And I wanted to give you an example just before we wrap up here, and that is Elon Musk tweeted this: Exxon is rated top 10 best in the world for environment, social and government, ESG, by the S&P 500, while Tesla didn't make the list. So obviously he's not too happy there that he's an electric car company, which is what they said they want, but yet they are rating Exxon among top 10. And it's not just top 10. Actually, Exxon is rated number 1 company in the world in the oil and gas sector. I'll tell you why that's absurd in a moment. So Elon's saying that ESG is a scam. It's been weaponized by phony social justice warriors. So let's look then. If you go onto Exxon Mobil's website, you might think something about energy and oil and everything else here. Nope, this is all about everything they're doing here. The whole website is about climate and what they're doing to improve sustainability and their outreach and energy access. And then if you do a search on any search engine, pretty much everything comes up. They've obviously bought the placements here. It's all, it's just so bizarre to read all these things about how great they are, what a good green energy company they are. Of course they're not a green energy company. It's just bizarre. But Vox actually did a good article on this, and it says Exxon Mobil wants you to feel responsible for climate change so it doesn't have to. And it's quite interesting here. And I watched this documentary on it. So from the 1970s to the 90s, the company's PR efforts focused on casting doubt. So they said there is no climate change, there is no, none of this sort of stuff. And that the burning of fossil fuels didn't contribute to warming the planet in any way. And they had all of these studies done on it. But then in the mid-2000s, it took a completely different approach. And you can probably guess what that approach was. They basically just blamed it all on people, on consumers. They said, we are, nothing to do with it at all. We're the ones that have been trying to warn everyone about this for decades. We told everyone that, we need to switch from this energy, but people just wouldn't listen. Governments wouldn't listen. They insisted that we keep producing all of this oil and fossil fuels and everything else. So they then flipped it and they said, it's your fault. It's the people's fault. It's the consumer's fault. And actually you go on their website and you read a lot of these reports, and that's basically what it's saying. It's saying it's your fault that we've got all these problems now. And as a company, they've been trying to solve it since day one. I mean, it's just bizarre, but this is what is now happening. I mean, if you have as much money as a lot of these companies do, you can pay for the best PR, you can pay for, you can buy the media, basically. You can buy the news. If you are set to make huge profits out of your product and your service, then you can make the media say anything you want, basically. And I think long term, just looking at my models and forecasting this, if it continues to weaken the economies that we've built up based on efficiency and profitability, and it just removes all of that and instead focuses on who is the most green and who can tick the most boxes and who can be the most diverse and all this other stuff, you're going to have some very serious problems in the future with a lot of these companies. So again, if you are an investor, I know some of you are investors or you have pensions and things like that, I would say don't vote with the ESG score. Vote with the company that is the most efficient in what it does. Now, yeah, if you want to look at how ethical they are, I mean, I do that myself. I do look for ethical investments. But that's a secondary metric. It's not my primary metric. My primary is to find who is the most efficient and profitable. And then I look at, is it a company that I like and would be willing to invest into? All right, that's all for today. Take care. God bless. I'll see you soon.